The Pentagon's War Command Center was alive with noise, screens flickering, keyboards tapping, voices low but sharp. Satellite feeds painted shifting lines of light across a wall of glass, showing the distant terrain of a place where decisions in this room could mean life or death. Around the long table, senior officers argued over targets and timetables. Every word carried tension, every silence carried weight. At the far end sat a woman most barely noticed, dressed in a plain gray suit, her hair tied back, eyes steady on the map. Her badge read simply, A. Vale, civilian consultant. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and quiet. That flight path crosses open terrain. You'll lose 2 aircraft before they reach the ridge. Lieutenant Jack Mercer looked up, jaw tight. You think you know better than the people who've bled for this plan? He stood abruptly, hands slamming the table. Before anyone could stop him, he struck her, a sharp, shocking motion that froze the room. Admiral Grace Carter's command cut the air. Security, get her out. Clearance revoked. Vale didn't argue, she only wiped her lip, eyes clear. You just made a bigger mistake than you realize. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Commander Aria Vale was 34 years old, though her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived several lives. To the people in that war room, she was just another civilian consultant, quiet, composed, and forgettable. Her gray suit had no medals, her name tag had no rank. No one saw the soldier beneath the calm. No one saw the Navy SEAL who had once gone where maps ended and signals died. 2 years earlier, her team, Echo Team, had been sent on a classified mission code named Barca 17. Only fragments of that story ever reached the surface. A failed extraction, a collapsed ridge, communications lost. The report listed them as KIA. Commander Aria Vale had died on paper, but she didn't die in truth. After her recovery, she was reassigned under a covert identity and quietly placed in the Pentagon Strategy Division. Her orders were simple but heavy: review field data, locate failures, and trace the decisions that had cost lives. She didn't speak about her past. She didn't wear her trident. She didn't correct the people who assumed she was a civilian. Most days, she spent hours in silence, analyzing maps, cross-checking telemetry, building timelines from wreckage. It wasn't just numbers she was chasing, it was names. And one of those names belonged to Lieutenant Jack Mercer's brother, Tom Mercer, the corpsman who had bled out in the sand while command delayed air support. Aria had been there that day. She remembered Tom's last words through static and dust. "Tell my brother. I did my job." She had carried those words ever since, written not on paper, but somewhere under her ribs. Inside the Pentagon, she worked like a ghost among the living, unnoticed, uninvited to the louder debates, yet always listening. Her tone was precise, never emotional. She spoke in measured sentences that left no room for argument, but her restraint only made her an easier target. People called her detached, arrogant, too cold for someone who'd never been out there. She never corrected them. When a colonel questioned her assessment of a supply route, she simply recalculated it and handed him a casualty projection that made the room go quiet. When a major scoffed at her methods, she let him talk until his logic ran out. That's how she survived, by staying calm, staying small, and letting the truth do the heavy lifting. Lieutenant Jack Mercer didn't see any of that. He saw a stranger who questioned his judgment, a consultant, daring to dissect the same system his brother had served. His grief had nowhere to go, so it turned to anger. Every time Aria spoke, he heard it as criticism. Every calm correction felt like a wound reopened. People whispered about him too, how he had changed since Tom's death. He drank too much coffee, slept too little, and argued with everyone. He was good at his job, but the edges were frayed. So when Aria pointed out that the new strike plan mirrored the same error that had doomed Barca 17, something in him snapped. She'd seen that look before, the raw defiance of someone cornered by truth. She didn't flinch when he shouted across the table. She didn't move when he slammed his hand against the map. And when his fist came, she didn't fight back. She simply took the hit, because she understood pain wasn't always the enemy. It was a message. The blood on her lip that morning wasn't humiliation, it was punctuation. For the first time, the entire room saw her. And that was all she needed. What none of them knew was that Arya had spent months preparing for that day. Every plan, every correction, every file she'd flagged was part of something bigger, an evidence chain connecting command failures to preventable deaths. She wasn't exposing mistakes for revenge. She was building proof, piece by piece, until the truth could no longer be buried under rank or silence. Still, in quiet moments, she would touch the inside of her wrist where a faint burn mark lingered, a scar from the explosion that ended Echo Team's last mission. That small mark reminded her of the ones who never came home. She carried them in her stillness, in the way she spoke with patience, in the way she refused to let emotion cloud her purpose. Inside the Pentagon, people forgot quickly. Promotions rose. Reports got rewritten. But Arya Vale remembered everything. And when she walked into that war room that morning, she already knew it would not end with that punch. She was there for something far greater, something that demanded patience, proof, and timing. All she needed was one moment that forced the truth into the light. That moment had just arrived. The echo of that strike lingered long after the sound faded. In the War Command Center, every conversation died mid-sentence. The officers who had just been debating strategy now stood frozen, eyes flicking from Arya Vale's calm face to Lieutenant Mercer's trembling hand. No one moved until Admiral Grace Carter rose slowly from her seat at the head of the table. "Escort her out," Carter said, her tone clipped and cold. "Revoke her clearance." Effective immediately. Her words cut through the room with the finality of a gavel. 2 security officers stepped forward. Arya didn't resist. She straightened her jacket, collected her folder, and let them guide her toward the door. Whispers broke out as soon as she was gone. Some sounded satisfied, others uneasy. Mercer's jaw was tight, his pulse racing, anger and shame battling across his face. Carter leaned toward her aides. "Get that file pulled. I want her off my floor before the hour's up." Outside, in the gray hallway that led toward the intelligence wing, Arya walked in silence. The 2 MPs escorting her didn't speak. The only sound was the hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic click of her shoes against the tile. Halfway down the corridor, a voice called out, "Wait!" Lieutenant Jack Mercer was running after her, a thick file clutched under his arm, the red stamp across the cover reading, "Classified, Terminated Personnel." 2 MPs followed close behind him. His face was flushed, and his words came sharp and fast. He slammed the folder onto the nearest desk. "You're impersonating a dead SEAL named Arya Vale," he said. "That's a felony, whoever you are. This ends now." Arya looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She could have shouted. She could have explained. But she didn't. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and steady. "Tom Mercer was 31 when he died," she said. "He had a compass tattoo behind his right wrist. He used to hum Simple Man before every patrol." Jack froze. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "And his last words," she said softly, were, 'Tell Jack I stayed.'" The hallway fell silent. The MPs who had been ready to restrain her hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks. Arya opened her hand. Resting in her palm was a single worn dog tag, the edges dulled, the engraving faded from sand and time. It read simply, "Mercer." T. Jack's breath caught. His legs felt weak, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. For a moment, the hallway blurred. He reached out, but stopped short of touching the tag, his voice breaking. "Where did you get that?" Arya didn't answer right away. She closed her hand gently around the tag. "I didn't get it," she said. "He gave it to me." The words landed heavier than any accusation. The MPs lowered their hands. One of them, older and broad-shouldered, took half a step back. The look in his eyes changed, from suspicion to respect, or maybe something closer to guilt. Jack stared at her, trying to fit this new reality into the story he had been told. His brother had died on a mission that Command labeled a logistical failure. The report was clean. The story was neat, but now, standing in front of him, was a woman who had clearly lived through it and who knew details no outsider ever could. He looked down at the folder he'd thrown. The top page bore a grainy photo of a younger Aria Vale, listed as deceased in action. Beneath it was the black line drawn through her name. He could almost hear his own voice mocking her hours earlier. "This can't be real," he muttered. Aria didn't answer. She placed the dog tag on the desk next to the file. The small piece of metal seemed to weigh 100 pounds. One of the MPs cleared his throat quietly. "Ma'am, should we?" Aria looked up, her tone still calm. "You should listen," she said, "because everything you think you know about Operation Barca 17 is wrong." The words struck like a coded alarm. Even the guard stiffened. That operation's name had been buried, sealed behind layers of clearance. Jack's anger drained into confusion. "You were there," he whispered. "I was," she said. "And I'm still here because someone up the chain decided that the truth would embarrass the wrong people." She turned toward the corridor that led deeper into the building. "You want to arrest me, Lieutenant?" "Fine. But you'll have to explain to Jag why your civilian analyst holds your brother's dog tag and knows what he said before he died." The MPs didn't move. Neither did Jack. For the first time, he noticed the way she carried herself. Not like an analyst, not like an outsider, but like someone trained to command under fire. Shoulders straight, eyes level, every movement efficient and deliberate. Aria picked up the folder and tucked it under her arm. "You've been fighting the wrong enemy," she said quietly. "But if you still want to know what really happened to Tom Mercer, follow me." Then she walked away. Calm, deliberate, unhurried, leaving behind 2 stunned MPs and a lieutenant whose world had just split open. Jack watched her disappear around the corner. The echo of her footsteps faded, but the truth she dropped refused to. For the first time since his brother's death, Jack Mercer wasn't sure who the hero was or who the enemy had been. Security hesitated only a second before stepping aside. Aria Vale walked past them without breaking stride, her face expressionless, her purpose clear. The hallway opened into the restricted operations wing, a quiet, sterile corridor lined with steel doors and blue lights that pulsed like heartbeats. The guards who had once mocked her now watched in silence. Every movement she made was precise. Her badge beeped once at the checkpoint, followed by a green light. Then came a coded sequence on a keypad, her fingers moving with familiarity no outsider should possess. The final verification was a retinal scan. The computer confirmed identity: Commander Aria Vale, JSOC clearance, active duty. The silence that followed was heavy. The guards exchanged looks. This woman they just escorted out didn't just belong here. She outranked half the building. Inside the operations bay, Aria moved straight to a terminal. Her reflection flickered across the glass screen as layers of encrypted menus unfolded. She entered another code, deeper clearance, one reserved for personnel long thought dead. Jack Mercer stood at the threshold, stunned. He'd followed her here, driven by disbelief more than duty. The MPs had fallen back, unsure whether to stop him or salute her. Aria began to type. The display filled with archived data feeds, comms logs, satellite recon, after-action reports. The header read, Operation Barca 17, Mission Failure. She didn't look up. "You've read the sanitized version," she said quietly. "Now you'll see what really happened." As she worked, fragments of memory surfaced half a world away, in a desert soaked with heat and silence, a dust storm tearing through the valley. The roar of gunfire breaking the calm, her radio crackling as she dragged a wounded SEAL through the dirt, shouting coordinates into the wind. She could still hear Tom Mercer's voice through the static. "Tell Jack I stayed." The flashback broke. Her hand hovered over the keyboard for a breath before resuming. On the screen appeared casualty reports, names, timestamps, call signs. Each entry matched an order signed off by higher command. Each order traced back to the same office, Admiral Grace Carter's. Arya opened the file titled C. Awalti, Shane, unreleased. Photos filled the screen wreckage, heat signatures, the final positions of Echo Team. She had spent 2 years building this record, one name at a time, one forgotten truth at a time. Jack stepped closer. His voice was barely a whisper. "You kept all this?" "I didn't keep it," Arya said. "I built it, because they buried what really happened to your brother and to mine." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the servers. The walls seemed to breathe with the weight of what they were seeing. Arya selected a final folder, Command Authorizations. There, in black and white, were the orders Carter had signed. Air support delayed by 90 minutes to verify coordinates, despite repeated distress calls. 90 minutes that cost lives. She highlighted the files and began an encrypted transfer. Destination: JAG Secure Vault. Colonel Reed Lawson. The timer appeared on screen, 6 minutes to completion. Jack's shoulders sank. The anger that had once burned so easily now turned to something quieter: shame, maybe even sorrow. He remembered the way he had hit her. The way she hadn't fought back. Behind him, one of the MPs whispered, "Ma'am, is this real?" Arya didn't turn. "You're looking at the truth." The timer ticked down. In her reflection, she could see Jack's expression hardening, not with defiance anymore, but with understanding. He wasn't looking at an analyst now. He was looking at a soldier who'd been fighting a different kind of war, one built on silence, evidence, and endurance. When the transfer reached completion, she removed the drive and slipped it into her pocket. Her voice was calm but final. "Now, it's out of their reach." She turned toward the door. The guards who had once tried to remove her stepped back instinctively. One nodded, quietly, without orders. Arya paused for a moment, looking toward the map projected on the wall, the same operation zone that had once taken everything from her team. The desert, the hills, the coordinates, they all glowed in sterile light now, stripped of pain. She whispered to herself, almost inaudible, "They called it failure. But we were never the ones who failed." Then she walked out, leaving the screen behind her glowing with the names of the fallen. Jack Mercer remained where he was, motionless, staring at the evidence that had just rewritten everything he thought he knew. For the first time, he didn't see an analyst. He saw a commander. And he finally understood what his brother had meant when he said, "I stayed." The warning came before the footsteps. A clipped voice over the intercom, tense and rushed, announced that Admiral Grace Carter was en route to the secure wing with a full security team. The air in the room tightened. Screens glowed with classified overlays, lines of code, and raw footage that was never meant for casual eyes. Arya Vale did not move away from the terminal. She stood with her shoulders relaxed, eyes steady on the monitor, hands resting lightly on the keyboard. The transfer window she had opened still showed completed packets moving off-site, but she was not done yet. Jack Mercer felt the change before he saw anyone. The hallway outside the glass door filled with movement boots, holsters, clipped phrases on radios. The MPs beside him straightened, caught between habit and uncertainty, waiting for direction that had not yet arrived. Then Carter appeared. She walked in at a controlled pace, but her anger arrived ahead of her. Her uniform was perfect, her ribbons in rigid rows, the stars on her shoulder catching the fluorescent light. Behind her came more security personnel, a mix of base police and military guards, all keyed up and ready to act. "That is enough," Carter's voice cracked across the room. "Step away from that terminal." She did not address Arya by name. She did not address her as an officer. Her words framed Arya as something small and disposable. An analyst, a problem, an irritation that needed to be swept away. "You are under arrest for breaching command data," Carter announced. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Arya did not turn. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a small, matte drive, no bigger than her thumb. Her fingers moved with the same calm precision she had shown all morning. She slid the drive into a secondary port and a new prompt appeared on the screen. Destination field, JAG Secure Intake, Colonel Reed Lawson. Jack felt his chest tighten when he saw the name. He knew Lawson's reputation, head of the Judge Advocate General's investigative unit, the kind of man who dealt in facts, not favors. When something reached his office, it no longer belonged to any admiral or staff. "Vale," Carter snapped, "this is your last warning." Arya's voice, when it came, was soft but carried clearly in the room. "You can destroy a file," she said, "but not the truth once it is uploaded." Her fingertips tapped a confirmation command. The progress bar lit up again, climbing from 0 to a slow, steady advance. 20%. Carter stepped forward, motioning to the closest guards. "Take her into custody, now." One of the MPs glanced at the screen, then at Arya, then at Carter. His jaw worked, but his hands did not move. There was a hesitation there, small but real. It was the kind of hesitation that came when training collided with conscience. 40%. Jack stood to the side, feeling like a man watching a fuse burn toward a charge he had not set. He heard his own heartbeat louder than the hum of the servers. A short time ago he had wanted this woman dragged out in cuffs. Now he was not sure where he stood. He stepped in front of one of the monitors and found himself staring at a still image from Barca 17. Dust. A broken ridge. Heat signatures lying motionless near a burned-out vehicle. In the corner of the frame, a blurred figure dragging another through the dirt. He did not need the caption to know who was on the ground. "Lieutenant Mercer," Carter said sharply, catching him in her line of sight. "Stand clear and let security do their job." Jack looked at her, then at Arya's back, then at the screen that still displayed his brother's name in an unreleased casualty log. He felt the old loyalty to Rank tug at one side of him, and his loyalty to Tom pull on the other. 60%. Carter's patience thinned. She gestured again. "Sergeant, restrain that woman. That is a direct order." The senior MP nearest Arya swallowed hard. His radio crackled faintly at his shoulder, a faint murmur of traffic passing through the net. He took one step toward her, then paused when a new voice cut across the channel, sharper and more urgent than the rest. "Priority broadcast for all security in the operations wing," the voice said. "Stand by for legal override." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Who is that?" No one answered. 80%. Arya's face remained calm. She watched the numbers move without flinching, each tick a step away from this room and into a space where Carter's rank could not reach. For her, this was not just a data transfer. It was a line she had been preparing to cross for 2 years. Every name she had recorded, every order she had traced, every log she had reconstructed led to this moment. If the upload completed, it would be impossible to quietly adjust the past. Carter took another step closer. "You do not understand what you are doing," she said. Her voice had shifted now from public command to something lower and more pointed. "You are risking active operations, foreign alliances, careers. You are exposing context you do not fully grasp." Arya finally turned her head slightly, just enough to meet the Admiral's eyes. "I was there," she said. "I grasp it." The room went still. The radio on the sergeant's shoulder crackled again, louder this time. "Repeat. Priority directive from Judge Advocate General. Effective immediately. Do not detain Commander Arya Vale. Confirm active duty status verification in progress. All units maintain position and await further instruction." The word hung there, Commander. Jack felt something pinch in his chest. The MPs looked at each other, at Carter, at Arya. The chain they thought they understood had just shifted. 90%. Carter's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "That is not possible," she said. "Her status is terminated. She is listed as deceased." The sergeant did not argue with her, but he did not move to arrest Arya either. His training told him that when JAG issued a hold, you obeyed it unless you wanted your career shredded in a courtroom later. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "we have conflicting orders. Until they are resolved, we are instructed not to put hands on Commander Vale." The title sounded heavy in his mouth, but once spoken, it could not be pulled back. Carter took a breath, trying to reassert control. "Commander," she repeated bitterly. "Is that what she told you?" "This is a stunt. This is an impersonation issue, and it will be dealt with as such." Arya did not respond. She was watching the last sliver of the progress bar. 100%. A soft tone chimed from the terminal, quiet but decisive. On the screen, a single line appeared, "Transfer complete." Recipient, Colonel Reed Lawson, Judge Advocate General. Status, time-stamped and encrypted. The room changed in that second. Not loud, not chaotic, just a subtle shift in air pressure, in posture, in the way eyes moved. Something had left the Admiral's reach and entered another world, one governed by law instead of rank. Carter saw it too. Her jaw tightened. She knew what it meant for that data to arrive in Lawson's vault with her signature stamped across the orders. She knew what obstruction of justice looked like on paper and how quickly it could turn stars on a shoulder into evidence exhibits. "This is not over," she said quietly, her voice stripped of show. "You think one upload changes everything? You have no idea how these things are contained." Arya removed the drive from the terminal and slipped it into her pocket. "Maybe not," she answered, "but now it is on record. If you bury it again, you will not be the only one answering for it." Jack watched Carter carefully. For the first time, the Admiral looked less like an unshakable authority and more like someone calculating damage. Her eyes flicked to him, then to the MPs, measuring who still stood in her shadow and who no longer did. The radio spoke once more, slower this time, the voice formal and unmistakably official. "All units in the operations wing, this is JAG Command Relay. Commander Arya Vale is recognized as active duty personnel assigned under Joint Special Operations Authority. Any detention or interference with her movement requires direct authorization from Judge Advocate General. Acknowledge." The sergeant answered without looking at Carter. "Operations Wing acknowledges." There it was. You could almost see the Admiral's power thinning at the edges. She still outranked almost everyone in that room on paper, but the ground under her feet had cracked. The decision about what came next no longer belonged only to her. Arya stepped away from the terminal, giving it a final glance to confirm what she already knew. Her work inside that system was done. The truth was no longer trapped in drafts, personal notes, or unsecured drives. It was sitting in a vault overseen by people whose job was to ask hard questions with no regard for how many stars were on a uniform. She walked toward the door. The MPs parted for her without needing to be told. As she passed them, the older one straightened his posture just a bit, not quite a salute, but not far from it. It was a small acknowledgement, the kind that said he understood that the story here was bigger than one bad line in a personnel file. Jack followed her with his eyes. Part of him wanted to stop her, to ask more, to apologize again, to know the whole thing now, without waiting for any investigation. Another part of him knew this was not his moment. This was hers, and Tom's, and the others whose names were now locked away in those encrypted files. Carter stood alone for a moment, not moving. The monitors around her still displayed maps, feeds, and charts as if nothing had changed. But everyone in that room knew better. Arya did not look back. She stepped into the hallway, leaving behind a war room where rank had always been the loudest language. For the first time in a long time, another language had entered the building. Dates, timestamps, signatures, and evidence that did not care who sat where at the table. The Admiral's voice no longer decided what was real. From that point forward, the truth would have to stand on its own. When Arya Vale stepped back into the war room, the space felt different. The low hum of monitors was still there, the smell of coffee and stale tension still hung in the air. But the laughter, the noise, the easy arrogance of before was gone. Her plain gray badge no longer hung from her pocket. In its place was a matte black identification card, the kind that only one branch used, Joint Special Operations Command. The kind that didn't need explanation. The two guards at the door stiffened as she approached. One started to lift his hand as if to stop her, then caught sight of the card. He stepped back immediately, holding the door open in silence. When Arya entered, heads turned, conversations died mid-sentence. Officers who had once dismissed her as an outsider now straightened without being told to. She walked to the end of the table where she'd been seated that morning, her expression calm, her steps measured. The door behind her opened again. This time it was Colonel Reed Lawson, the Judge Advocate General's representative. His arrival drew everyone to attention. He carried a folder marked Top Clearance and a look that left no room for ceremony. "Remain seated," he said quietly. The authority in his tone didn't come from volume. It came from certainty. He placed the folder on the table and opened it with deliberate care. His reading glasses caught the light as he scanned the page, then spoke, his voice steady, every word echoing through the room. "Commander Aria Vale, United States Navy SEAL, Echo Team, verified active duty under Joint Special Operations Command." No one moved. The room was silent enough to hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Lawson continued, "All prior disciplinary actions against Commander Vale are hereby suspended, pending a full investigation into the mishandling of Operation Barca 17. Admiral Carter's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The officers who had stood beside her hours earlier now avoided her gaze. They understood the weight of that document. It meant oversight, accountability, and exposure. Jack Mercer sat motionless, his shoulders drawn in, his eyes fixed on the table. When he finally looked up, Aria was already looking at him. She didn't glare, didn't smirk. There was no victory in her expression, only quiet acknowledgement. He lowered his head, ashamed. He had struck her, doubted her, accused her of stealing a name that was, in fact, her own. Lawson closed the folder. "Effective immediately," he said. "Commander Vale retains full access to classified operations data and investigative authority under JAG supervision." No one challenged it. Aria took a slow breath. The same room that once humiliated her now sat in perfect silence, every uniform, every rank, every voice waiting for her next move. But she didn't speak. She simply placed Tom Mercer's worn dog tag on the table, turned, and walked out. For the first time, no one stopped her. The silence that followed Colonel Lawson's announcement felt almost physical, pressing down on everyone in the room. No one spoke. No one moved. The realization had settled over them like a slow tide, quiet, inescapable, heavy. Jack Mercer's throat tightened. He rose to his feet, unsure if he had the right to speak at all. "Commander," his voice cracked. "I didn't know. I thought." Aria stopped him with a small motion of her hand. Her tone was calm, but not cold. "You were grieving your brother," she said. "And you were right to fight for him. You just hit the wrong target." The words landed softly, but they carried a weight that filled the space between them. Jack lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. His hands trembled slightly as he drew them to his side. Then, slowly, he straightened. His boots clicked against the polished floor. Without a word, he raised his hand and saluted her. It wasn't dramatic. There was no applause, no rush of emotion, just one soldier recognizing another. Across the table, another officer stood and did the same. Then, another. Within seconds, the gesture spread through the room, a quiet, collective acknowledgement. Even the Marines who had escorted her out that morning now stood at attention, eyes forward, back straight. The same men who once led her away in silence now saluted the woman they had misjudged. Admiral Carter remained seated. Her face had lost all color, her jaw set in disbelief as Colonel Lawson turned toward her. "Admiral Grace Carter," he said evenly, "you are temporarily relieved of command pending full review under Judge Advocate oversight." For the first time all day, Carter didn't argue, her head lowered, hands folding neatly in front of her. The rank on her shoulder no longer meant protection. Aria didn't look at her. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction. She simply reached down, picked up Tom Mercer's dog tag from the table, and walked to where Jack stood. She placed it gently in front of him. "He believed in you," she said quietly. "Make sure you live like he still does." Jack's eyes burned as he nodded, unable to speak. His fingers closed around the tag, and for the first time since his brother's death, his shoulders eased. Colonel Lawson gave Aria a respectful nod. "Commander Vale," he said, "thank you for bringing this forward." "You did the right thing." Arya inclined her head slightly. The right thing's all that's left when the easy thing runs out. And just like that, the tension broke, not with noise, but with a kind of reverent stillness. Every man and woman in that room understood they had witnessed something rare, integrity standing taller than rank. No one cheered. No one clapped. They simply stood, heads high, in quiet respect. As Commander Arya Vale walked out of the war room and into the corridor beyond. Hours later, the war room was still, the chatter, the movement, the noise, all gone. Only the faint hum of machines and the glow of the tactical map remained, casting soft light over the empty chairs. Commander Arya Vale stood alone at the center of the room. The same digital map that once sent her team into disaster flickered in front of her, the same coordinates that had been called necessary losses. For a long time she said nothing, her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass surface. Finally she spoke, barely above a whisper. "We don't honor them by protecting reputations," she said. "We honor them by protecting the truth." Her words weren't meant for anyone else. They were for the men she'd lost, for the ones whose names she'd just fought to restore. Behind her, the door opened softly. Jack Mercer stepped inside, his uniform still rumpled from the long day. He looked exhausted, but his eyes carried something steadier now, understanding. "They'll fix the records now," he said quietly. "Your report, the files, they're already moving through JAG. It's being corrected." Arya nodded, her gaze still fixed on the map. "They'll start," she said, "but the rest is up to us." Jack hesitated for a moment, as if there was more he wanted to say, but no words seemed right. So he just stood beside her in silence, staring at the same map that had once divided them. When Arya finally turned to leave, the early afternoon light from the Pentagon courtyard poured through the glass. The sunlight caught the small gold trident pinned to her collar, worn, nearly hidden, but unmistakable. It gleamed for a moment before she disappeared into the hallway. Jack watched her go, the dog tag still clutched in his hand. The silence that filled the room wasn't empty, it was reverent. He knew what she had risked to bring the truth forward, and in that quiet moment, he understood something his brother had always tried to teach him, that courage doesn't always happen on the battlefield. It happens in rooms like this, where silence used to win. Arya didn't wait for thanks. She didn't look back for approval. She had done what she came to do, not for recognition, not for redemption, but for the record to finally speak truth. Outside, the courtyard wind carried the faint sound of the flag snapping against its pole. The sky above was clear, the kind of clear that only comes after a storm. Real honor doesn't demand attention. It endures quietly, until truth makes it impossible to ignore. She never asked for recognition. She didn't want applause, or medals, or a headline attached to her name. All she wanted was for the record to finally speak the truth, for the men who gave everything and were left behind by silence. That day, the war room didn't just watch a woman defend her name. They witnessed what integrity looks like when it walks quietly, without rank, without fanfare, and still changes everything. Stories like this remind us that courage isn't loud. It lives in the quiet moments, in the people who do what's right when no one is watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.